Part 3, Chapter 15, Wings. It was the start of something completely different, something I never dreamt of before, and it soon absorbed my whole existence. Dean was a hobby pilot. He'd flown a very short time in the Great War, and he had gotten his hands on a Sopwith Camel. He first taught me to fly, casually. I couldn't get enough. It was the most beautiful experience I'd ever had in my life. The house sold and I did some night classes and graduated. I moved out and stayed in the cottage. I got my pilot's license. Dean started me on more night classes. I got more responsibilities. We did barnstorms and I started earning some money. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't a life. I kept feeling the eyes on my back, the sideways remarks. I told Dean I didn't think I'd ever make a life in Rome. I had no friends other than Dean and Linda. I didn't want to know anyone I had before, and it seemed everyone sort of felt the same about me. Then the war broke out and Dean started telling stories of flying in the First War, and it planted the seed, and he sighed, swallowed. That's about it. He had turned half away in the telling of it, and now he looked at her. Her face was tear-streaked. They stared at each other for a long time. "I'm sorry, Elle," he said quietly. She shook her head, reached out, held on to him tightly, pressed her face against his chest. There was a slight shiver in his body. His heart was beating very fast. He was afraid, held her against him. When she finally spoke, it was muffled against his chest. "Danny, I love you." They held onto each other for a long time. Just before he released her, he whispered it back. "I love you too. Thank you." On Monday, the lock had barely opened when Johnny sat down across from her. "Top of the morning to you, lass." The brogue was richly exaggerated. She smiled at him, said nothing. "How about some hair of the dog?" "Whiskey?" "Bushmills. It's been one hell of a weekend. Make it double." He grinned at her, then looked at her searchingly. "You're pale and you're quiet." Danny and I talked. Johnny's eyebrows shot up. "He told me, Johnny." "Ah." It was half a word, half a sigh. "That'll be another Bushmills and single, please. No, I'm serious." She poured and handed over without question. He handed it back. "That's for you. No, you're drinking it. Duncan drove out of town when I came in." She gingerly took a sip. "Are you all right, Hal?" She nodded. "I expected something else. I don't know what, but not that. It was the worst that he seemed to think I would think badly of him." "It makes you sick, doesn't it?" "How did it come around that he told you?" "We were in a bar fight in Oxford." Johnny laughed a little. "You, as in the two of you were in a bar fight?" "Why, I was drunk and angry and he was a stranger and I swung at him." "What happened?" "He knocked me down with one shot. He can hit. Then he gave me a hand up and bought me a beer and they asked me to leave, so we sat outside. I said to him, the last guy who knocked me flat in one blow was my dad a long time ago. He said it only hit someone once before, and he had died. It was then I saw he was shaking. So he got a bit drunk and maudlin and he told me the whole story. I felt bad, you know. I mean, my dad is a bit of a bastard, but he never hit me without me going him hard. I don't like him and he doesn't like me, but at least if I went to him now in need, he'd lend me £5 after cursing the ground I stand on." Johnny sighed, shook off his thoughts. "He's a good lad, Al." You know, I didn't introduce him to you just for a Sunday lunch. You're the same kind of folk, cut from the same fabric. It was a bit of a drunken thought that night in Duxford that you should get to meet him. Call it a hunch. It was her turn to laugh. I knew it from the start, and so did he, Johnny. We spoke about it that first night, and we said you'd be smug. Johnny smiled. I'm not smug, Elle. I'm just very content.